Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Smart Indian Agriculture on the Federal.com. I am Vivian Fernandez. The pandemic has reminded consumers that health and wellness are not to be taken for granted. Producers seek to appeal to our anxiety with claims that their products boost immunity. There is also a wariness about chemicals. People want to go back to nature. They seek reassurance in traditional medicines. Has this boosted the demand for medicinal herbs and aromatic plants? Who better to answer these questions than Somit Mukherjee, Senior Vice President, Central Procurement and Planning at Dabur India? Dabur says it is the largest science-based Ayurveda company. It has such familiar brands as Dabur Amla Hair Oil, Pudin Hara, a mint-based remedy for indigestion, Dabur Chyawanprash, a tonic, Dabur Honey, and Honitus, a cough syrup. The company has annual sales of 11,000 crore rupees, three quarters of which come from healthcare and personal care products. Shomit, welcome to this interview.
Thank you, Vivian.
Yeah. Shomit, people are seeking health and wellness after the pandemic. Has this provided tailwinds to your company's business?
Yeah, Vivian. So typically, with the pandemic, as you mentioned, there was a movement back to nature and to items and products that give us immunity. Typically, so all those products happened, and we happen to be at the core of that. In terms of a herbal portfolio that dates back to a company that is 138 years old by now, and these products that you mentioned just now, they are also pretty old. They are all well established. They're well distributed, and one more aspect of this was brought out during the pandemic. So post the pandemic, or in relation to the various stages of the pandemic, this entire herbal portfolio has done extremely well, and so have those items associated with that. And not only Dabur, but traditional Indian medicine, typically drawn from Ayurveda, etc. They have also done very well, and the demand of them has gone up. Not only the demand has gone up, but also the spread, the geographical spread has also greatly improved in terms of being area focused to becoming more widely available and with far more inquiry, and as you mentioned, becoming more science-based.
Mm-hmm. So has this translated into additional demand for medicinal herbs?
Yeah, that's right. So as the products have gone up, the herbs that are part of all these products that you have mentioned and many more have also gone up, and roughly there seems to have been between a 40 to 60% kind of an increase in specific herbs based on the products that were. And now that the pandemic the levels of the pandemic have come down, at least in India, these levels have settled down, but not much lower. Typically, they are all settled at a higher plane.
Mm-hmm. See, I was going through Dabur's website, and it lists about 60 medicinal plants and trees, nuts, fruits, flowers that Dabur sources. For example, Amalthas or Indian laburnum, Ashoka, Brahmi, Tulsi, Neem, Amla, Senna, and Muleti, to name a few. Is there enough reliable supply of these products, or is your business supply constrained?
There indeed is a supply constraint in some select herbs, basically. But also what tends to happen is that a lot of these herbs that are grown out in the wild and which are casually grown, which actually often, as it's not organized agriculture, they were not coming to the market. With the pandemic, supply increase has also occurred, or supply response has also occurred by way of these getting collected, organized, sold in proper market structures, etc. So, for example, we conduct for our annual contracts, basically for our buying, for the items that you mentioned, the herbs that you mentioned, we conduct an e-procurement, basically. So we buy online, and this was mainly done in order to promote both transparency as well as to increase the reach, so that we don't depend upon a few sources. In the last 2 years, typically post-pandemic, the interest in the auction in terms of people who want to log in and who want to associate with us to buy or to sell, that has gone up by nearly 60 to 70%. So to give you an idea, terminal suppliers to the extent of 40 to 50 sources who may have their own sub-sources could have been about 40 to 50. This has got boosted to 60 to 70. Plus, I myself get calls from NGOs, from smaller self-help groups, etc., in remote corners, who also want to bring their produce to the market. typically 2 to 2 years a very small time to grow something. But what's available, that quantity increases in the market, and that is what we've seen here.
Mhm. Is this because there has been a digital transformation as well, and it is now easier to reach out to companies like you through the online medium? Earlier on, you had to go to, I mean, it was, even if we had the products, it was not possible for us to reach the buyers. Now, perhaps because of the spread of internet, because of the spread of e-commerce, maybe producers and buyers, they're coming, the distance has been reduced.
Yes, and interestingly, this is both sides. Access to these products has also increased because things have come online. Because it costs far less to take these products to the market. People were looking up for such products, and the search basically for such products has also greatly increased. Now, following that is interestingly the annual auction that I mentioned is this year is the 20th edition. It has started in the year 2002, but never before have we seen such interest as we've seen the last 2 years in terms of being of people willing to supply. And also with that, it has brought them higher realization as a result of higher demand. And so the cycle perpetuates itself.
So these new suppliers, they are self-help groups, they are people who are interacting with, who are engaged with tribals.
Yes. So there are sub-sources. So what tends to happen is that as in any agricultural produce, there are levels of value addition which are required. And there is a level of collection that is required. Now, in these herbs, especially, if you look at the herbal space particularly, then they're not grown in a very contiguous area. They're grown in disconnected areas, smaller areas, in smaller pockets, etc. And often the awareness is not very good amongst even those who grow them or where they are grown. So, for example, take a typical semi-forest area or an area in which these grow even as weeds as not being known. Then in that area, the mainstream crop or what grows as agriculture is better known compared to the herbs. Now, this has also increased awareness. As increasing awareness happened, there are so many people who ask us to help them identify, who want to know how to collect them sustainably, in the sense that they don't damage any part of the tea, because now it brings far greater value. And typically, there is also a parallel move towards diversification, because typically a single crop or a couple of crops that they do, that often might bring them an organized market, but there are these significant periods of downturn. By and large, the herbal product items market, typically all these items that you mentioned, they don't swing so much. They bring regular cycle once you get into them, and they are easier to manage. So all that has gone in the favor, and these are also those queries that people want to ask. And for that, we also have what is known as a bioresources cell department. We have a separate wing in the company which addresses these queries and associates, and wherever it is possible to connect to business, typically over a period of time, that is also done.
Let's suppose I'm a traditional farmer, a farmer who grows traditional crops, and I have now diversified partly into aromatic plants or medicinal herbs. So how do I sell to Dabur?
So Dabur, on the Dabur website, there are various ways to connect typically, but one of the easiest way to connect is to actually link to the Dabur website, www.dabur.com, and there is askdabur.com, wherever every kind of supplier query is answered. Even if for some reason business cannot happen, still those queries are answered in terms of where they can go, because all products are not there in the company. Large number of queries are answered in terms of business relationships, right? And some of those queries cannot be answered, or inquiries cannot be answered in terms of our not being able to do so, but they still move forward in terms of what can they do. And this is not only for herbs or spices, or like you mentioned, aromatic plants, which typically also have other alternate markets other than product market that we have. But there are the number of hits to this kind of a website basically has done very well. We are also on our way to in items like honey. We are on our way to launching an education website also, so that there is a wider reach, typically to leverage on the online medium.
No, this education outreach is for what? To get more suppliers or more sources of supply, or to educate the beekeepers in how to produce honey in a way that has very low pesticide residues and all that.
So both the things, typically both the things happen, because as the educator, typically and with a strong brand that is there in the market, then people do come to know that you are in the market and you could associate for further details. So both do happen, but it is quite possible that due to access reasons, due to better markets for them, for better realization nearby, not everybody who would connect to a website or who would get educated would become a supplier of sorts, typically. So the idea is broader. Actually, the way to look at it, Vivian, is that if the idea perpetuates itself, then a wider market will get created. A wider sourcing will get created, not only for us but for the industry as such. So that is the game, typically. Just to answer, elaborate my answer a little bit more. We have a project in Odisha in which we collect herbs. We associate with the tribal community, and there it is. They are also taught how to identify herbs, because in these areas they have rights. The tribal families have rights, but often they do not know how to identify a particular herb which is of value and how to bring it to market, how to sustainably collect it. But these programs are done through NGOs and through the government and with the local government support also, with the access that has been given, and they come to the market. So in such cases, we not only educate, but we also entirely buy back the produce. That is also done. But some of the produce cannot come to us in any case, and it will go to other forces of the market, which is quite okay.
How strong is your tribal outreach? A few years ago, I visited the Udaipur regulated market yard, and there I found a lot of minor forest produce being sold, being traded, like Safed Musli, wild amla or gooseberry, neem berries, and mahuwa fruit. Now, what had happened was that the Rajasthan government had eased the regulations for trading in minor forest produce, and that is why a lot of this stuff from the neighboring tribal areas was coming into the mandi. Do you reach out to such mandis like in Udaipur and elsewhere?
Yes, we do. We have an outreach in Odisha, as I mentioned, which is going into its 11th or the 12th year by now, and it is doing extremely well with constantly expanding its reach. Apart from that, there is association in Chhattisgarh, and in Rajasthan, for example, you have mentioned amla. So a lot of dried amla that comes into the market in India comes from that area. So sukha amla, for example, because amla is a very seasonal commodity and it only grows in winter, and the way to preserve it is to dry it typically and retain its properties. And the local tribals, and there's people who convert them, they make dry amla, and there is a market for this throughout the year. So there is association through this, and there are NGOs who work in this area. Typically, as what happens, we like to work with, rather than individuals, we like to work with a body who can then organize them better, and then this kind of a work can happen over a period of time, because capacity building is not a one-day exercise. It's a several month or a several year kind of an exercise, and we would also like them to be diversified, because one of the issues in agriculture is that everything that is there in agriculture, typically herbs are also a form of agriculture, minor agriculture or minor forest produce. The problem is that there are seasons for this, and therefore, in order to retain interest of the farmers or tribals, be it as may, they need to have regular sources of income. So something that is available in the summers, in the Kharif season, something in the winters, something else in the Rabi, all that is tried to be done so that there is a cycle possible within their own ecosystem and out of their own ecosystem. Now, some of those, let us say there is a family of herbs, some of those cannot be made into products, because even making a product successfully, marketing it successfully is quite a challenge. But most of these things can be used, and this is supported. As they get visibility, then they are also able to go to other potential buyers and figure out their markets, and also look for science-based solutions to the problems on the ground in terms of agriculture. For example, you have very rightly mentioned about pesticide residues, or it leads itself to natural farming, but it needs to be educated on the ground. And natural farming in every area means something else. In every state, every system means something else, because using natural resources. So all that also becomes a part of the entire ecosystem, and there are more people who join into the bandwagon.
Mm-hmm. No, Somit, there are certain products, for example, neem. There's a big demand from the fertilizer industry because India is now doing neem-coated urea. to ensure that there is, as much of urea gets absorbed by the plant and does not get leached into the soil. So there has been a big program going on for the past 3 or 4 years. Now, has that reduced your source of supply? Because the fertilizer companies want neem oil, and I'm told that there is not enough to go around.
Right. So actually, I don't think we compete with fertilizer companies per se in this specific item like neem, but there are certain other items. If I may give an example, for example, the natural mint, which is known as mentha, which grows in UP, technically, Uttar Pradesh, technically, the demand of that has gone up because other industries now use it. Because there's a movement from synthetic to natural as a result of the pandemic. It is basically along with the with a regular flow, even this kind of an item has gone up. So there is this example of this item, which is actually whose supply response has been somewhat slow, but that is natural, and I wouldn't think that that will eventually create a crisis, because then area does pick up, prices do move up. There is a supply response by way of price, by way of more land coming in, and things correct themselves.
Mhm. The Central Institute of Medicinal and Aromatic Plants, based in Lucknow, it says that the cultivation of menthol-rich mint varieties, which mature in about 3 months, can yield a profit of rupees 60,000 per hectare in about 3 months. The cultivation of Kuss, with improved oil yield of 25 kg per hectare, is also very profitable, it says. And geranium, cultivated in degraded saline soils, provide an additional source of income to small and marginal farmers. Would you recommend to farmers looking for profitable crops to shift away from traditional crops to aromatic plants?
I would like to say that they can divert a part of their land and actually make it part of their risk management overall. So there is thing called income management, there is also land management. Both these can happen very easily if there is a diversified model that is possible. And typically, my personal observation over the years is that the price cycle, because that is eventually it has to bring in some kind of an income, steady income, is different from field crops or regular crops. These are cash crops, and they actually go opposite to the field crop cycle in terms of the pricing and the downturns and the upturns. So very good price risk management happens through this, and also the land management in terms of retaining its fertility and making sure that there are in terms of pest management, the costs, the total cost that the farmer or the tribal has to invest typically has also come down. This is something that I've seen through my examples, through the examples that we've seen that has happened.
So
the other thing also is that the demand cycle. Yeah, I just thought I'll just complete the answer, because nothing is over without the demand. In terms of the demand cycle, the demand for both these groups of items, anything that is grown traditionally and the aromatic plants, is very different, right? And they naturally do not enter the same cyclical forces together. They are mostly opposite of each other, and that is what we look for.
So the prices are not volatile in the case of medicinal plants?
Volatile, but they are more range bound. And the cycle is opposite to the regular crops that farmers cultivate. If you take, for example, wheat or rice or maize, now generally at this point of time, most of these agricultural commodities have gone up, and the reason is the war and stuff like that. But nothing much is affected, and they will come down one day. But this is not likely to happen in the case of the aromatics or the herbs.
Now, Dabur's website says that it is engaged with 9,770 farmers for herb cultivation, and it sources honey from 4,675 beekeepers. Now, do you have engagement with individual farmers, or do you engage with them through aggregators or to farmer producer organizations? Because I can understand a large company like yours, cannot afford to spend management time and the time of the employees in interacting with individual farmers.
Right. So very good point. Actually, we engage with about 14 to 15 different organizations, mostly NGOs, or those who are engaged, typically who have launched organizations for the good of the farmers in this area, and we work through them. But the reason why we work through them, and first I'll answer about herbs, because this is something which is a much larger base that we work on. is that these are actually disaggregated areas typically. They're grown in small areas. They're not contiguous typically. And as a result of which the geographical area which needs to be covered for engaging with individuals is very large. So it is best suited that this job be left with an agency which is an organization which is working in that area and which belongs to those people. And through them we work. We provide them the management inputs, the farm inputs which are there. We provide saplings. We've got 2 nurseries. We have got a significant nursery in North India in Kashipur in the foothills of Himalayas, where we actually use quality planting material, and we give out every year something like 30 lakh odd saplings. And we also have one in Nepal, which is also part of the same Himalayan ecosystem. And we provide these saplings. For example, just now, as we speak, in the next 2-3 days, we will be distributing saplings in Madhya Pradesh for Amla. Amla used to be very big in Madhya Pradesh at one point of time. It is reduced since then, and now it is regaining its former glory, and it is going to be planted in the forest and as an experiment even in the lands. To come back to answer the question about Dabur's engagement with the with these places, we are working in about 10 different states with these 16 different organizations right now, and projects keep happening as organizations mature. Then many of them work on their own, and we look for new partnerships typically, and then we handhold them fully in terms of supervision, in terms of expert help, and even buybacks wherever required.
Do you have contract farming arrangements?
Yes. So in these cases, there are these contract farming arrangements. We sign agreements with them where we can buy back the produce.
And how do you ensure traceability? For example, if I'm a buyer of honey and I want to make sure that the pesticide residues are minimal or within tolerable limits, how can I assure myself? Can I go back to the source? Can you tell me where this honey is coming from?
Yes. So right now we are in the process of developing a tool which actually tracks down to the final producer, including the GPS coordinates about where the beekeeper has been, because beekeeping is also a migratory activity. And typically, in order to ensure that the nectar is available for the bees, the farmer or the beekeeper has to migrate. So we are in the process of developing a tool which will map out where the producer has been in a certain period of time, and this is linked. This is then brought in this entire chain, which may involve 2 or 3 persons in the beekeepers, and somebody will have to consolidate it because he can't bring small amounts of produce. A typical let us say a beekeeper at a point of time can get about 40 kilos per harvest of this honey, and then this needs to be consolidated in an area. So there are consolidators. We can reach up to the final beekeeper in different areas through the means of GPS. Eventually, when this produce is landing in our factory in the unit, it is tested, and it is even found out what kind of flora is there in that, and whether that flora existed at the time of the harvest in a specific area, region, and time. All that traceability is being in the process of development, and we will be soon be uploading this. Right now, we are using it for our internal testing purposes, and then it is linked. So yeah, just a word. I just answer the question point on the pesticide residues. They are linked to in the end every pesticide, every other component of honey typically which is present in honey, which is foreign to it, is also checked as per the standards of the land, and the idea is to promote those areas and those beekeepers and those flowers where these issues are not there.
Somit, I come from an area where sandalwood was at one time, sandalwood plants were in plenty, sandalwood trees. Then government policies ensured that people had a kind of adversarial relationship with sandalwood. The moment they saw the plant, they would uproot it, because if the plant became a tree and the tree was stolen, then the owner was held responsible. So they did not want to have any such hassles with the law, and they would uproot the sandalwood plants. And no one grows sandalwood now in their compounds to avoid trouble with the law. Now, I think Dabur also uses sandalwood How do you source it? Do you go to government depots, let's say in Tamil Nadu, or do you grow your own sandalwood?
We do both. We are in the process of building up a sandalwood farm, but I would say it is half done. We buy only from registered auctions through those people who are able to show that they have participated in registered auctions typically, and they are produced. So sandalwood, in our case, it's a question of sandalwood oil, which is one step beyond sandalwood. So in such cases, there are these receipts of auctions in which they can show that they trace back their supply to a particular event that has been held by a government department, and then they supply. That is how it is done. Over a period of time, we are going to develop self-sufficiency. The gestation period of sandalwood is 15 years minimum to get oil, and we are growing our own sandalwood farm, and this can be called as a corporate farm in relation to what you just now discussed as contract farming, and this is beginning. Many others also are doing it, and we expect that in the next 7 or 8 years we will be able to attain self-sufficiency.
Now, Dabur has a presence in 120 countries, and I would imagine that most of these countries are places where Indians are present. Have you been able to make a dent in non-traditional markets like Europe or America with Ayurvedic formulations? I'm not talking about just selling herbs, but formulations.
Yes. So there is headway in the US where there is a diaspora. Obviously, there is a great understanding of Indian tradition and Ayurveda. We've done well, but it is surprising to note, it might be surprising to note that Ayurveda is very strong in places like Russia, the former Soviet Union, Soviet republics. Now, notwithstanding the war, but it is a good market for, it has over the years, and not only just now, in terms of products like Chawanprash. So they've done quite well, and they meet the regulatory standards. Now, over the period, typically you need to have a product license to sell in these countries, and a great headway is being made in these areas. Now, apart from that, there are these areas like Middle East and in the US where Dabur or other Ayurveda, the Indian tradition, remains strong by way of diaspora, and that is also happening.
Now, because of the pandemic, people are now discovering the virtues of traditional medicine, and there is, for example, a craze about curcumin or turmeric in the West, turmeric-laced latte and all that. Has this helped your business?
So our products we don't have sole products which are based on turmeric, but we are in the process of launching what are known as single herb or single spice items or products, basically, which find a market. In general, curcumin has found itself as an extract. Curcumin extract is used in many such products. In general, we do not go into extracts. We don't use extracts. We use whole herbs or whole spices. Now, to leverage on this and in continuing with our tradition and to complete the portfolio, we are planning to do single herbs in which items like curcumin would find a place.
Would you be also exporting medicinal herbs wholesale? Yeah, in the form of commodities?
So at the moment, we are going to concentrate on the products itself, typically, because that's our forte. And there is no plan to do herbs as such. But there are these, to answer, there are these companies, organizations which actually export Indian herbs or spices, not only in the whole form, but also as extracts or as oleoresins. This business also has increased. This particular area of validation has also increased greatly during the time of the pandemic, where there are certain specific herbs like ashwagandha, which became very famous as immunity builders and all that. And we ourselves are in products of ashwagandha. We were there in products of ashwagandha also ever since. But there are other ways to do it. But we ourselves are not into direct export of raw materials. We would like to rather add value and build a brand.
Somit, that was a very insightful conversation. Thank you very much.
Subscribe to the Federal's YouTube page for more interesting updates.